Now, I would like for the panel discussion to invite Mr. Sailesh Bhatia on stage, Mr. Julian Bevis, and Mr. Naveen Prakash, and of course, our moderator for the session, Ms. Tanya Pulunovita.
We would like to open the floor to audience to ask questions from our panelists.
Sailesh, my name is Rizwan.
Good morning.
My question may be sound political in nature, but I would like to ask, the Indian Ocean, which has been an ocean of peace, is gradually becoming competitive. And could you please explain the large agenda under the Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, collective efforts, inclusive growth, going to impact the global supply chains, given the fact that it is no more Indian Ocean, maritime policy, it is going to be Pacific Ocean or Indo-Pacific concept right now. Thank you.
So, Julian or me? Hello? It's a very, very wide question. I don't know where to start and where to finish, but I'll make an attempt on it. So, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas is a very important initiative of the country, I would say, in India. And the basic objective, as you would have understood if people know Hindi, it says that the collective population should be part of the collective growth and collective prosperity. So it should not be limited to a particular entrepreneur or a particular industry, but the percolation of the benefits of industrialization and the opening up of the economy should go down to every citizen. And, I will like to say this in a different way. There is a Hindi saying, and I want to tell you a small story. And it goes back to, I think, somewhere in the 90s when there was a big crisis in India on the balance of trade, and we had a foreign exchange problem also. So I was sitting in a taxi, and the taxi driver was cursing the government. And that was when the government was trying to do the best for the poor people. So he said to me, I asked him, why are you cursing the government? He said, look here, until the Raja, king, does not have a laddu, bundi laddu. So a bundi laddu is a sweet meat with small, small pearls of sweets put together. He said, until he doesn't eat that, the pearls don't fall down. And if they don't fall down, the poor are not going to eat it. So, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas is trying to percolate that small pearls of the bundi laddu to go down to the masses. Your question about Indian subcontinent and the connect, it's too wide. I don't know where to start, but the basic thing which I'm trying to convey is that there will be collective progress if it is done well by the government. It doesn't need to be that opening up an economy is bad. It can be structured in a good fashion that everybody is a part of the benefit which is accruing to the country. I hope I've been able to answer.
Any other questions?
Hi, I'm Nahil Vijaysurya, a bit involved in shipping. I want to ask the gentleman about this port Vizhinjam, which I believe is closer to Colombo than Jaffna. That's how close it is, I'm told. The current state of it and when it is developed, how it will affect Colombo, especially with Adani being involved in both Colombo and Vizhinjam.
To whom are you referring the question, Nahil?
Anyone, actually. I think the gentleman on the left is on your left, or your right, rather.
Julian.
No, the gentleman was a specialist in India.
I'll again try to attempt to answer it. But, I would start with the caveat that the point that Adani is now a common denominator for you all. Adani is in Colombo and Adani is in Vizhinjam. This is going to actually help that they would probably make a collective approach, because it doesn't need to be one loses to the other. In fact, it has to be a win-win, and that's what business is about. Business is not about I win, you lose. Business is about both players who do business. They both should win, and then only the game goes on. Otherwise, it's like a cricket match. There's one team which won and one which lost. So to answer you, I don't know about their plans, but I'm sure it would be a collaborative approach. Maybe the thought process in Sri Lanka would need to be modified to take in the developments taking place into India. But it cannot be that, it's going to be you lose and India wins. It would probably be with Adani especially, being there in both places. It should become a collaborative win-win approach. And I would request Julian and Naveen to offer some comments if they would like to.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm very reassured by the fact that the questioner referred to the gentleman on the stage, which I'm very impressed by, seeing as we're all in the shipping industry. I don't know what the detailed plans are for Vizinjan, frankly. You'd have to ask Adani about that. But I think one can be certain that organisation will complete their plans, and they will produce an operating port in the south of India. Exactly when, as I said, I don't know. How that's going to play out in terms of Adani's investment here as well, again, I don't know. I mean, they've got ports in India which compete one with another, so we'll have to watch that with interest. But I think the big message from that is that as the months and years go by, the Port of Colombo will be faced with real competition. And that will come from Vizinjan, it will come from other ports in South Asia, and more widely across the Indian Ocean, which will compete with this hub for transshipment, consolidation, ship handling business. I mean, I think you mentioned some consolidation businesses already moved away from here. And it doesn't move away because people like or dislike a particular place. It's just cost effectiveness. And certainly as far as the shipping lines are concerned, transshipment is a very mobile business. It will move from one transshipment hub to another for a very small margin, which means that the logistics industry as a whole, the ports, the supporting industry, government, needs to watch Vizinjan with real care, because it won't just be Vizinjan, there will be others that will compete with Colombo, and who knows, we suddenly may see a large operator move their services. So whether Adani gets Vizinjan going on Monday or Tuesday of next week, I haven't a clue. Ask them. The key point is there's real competition coming.
I want to add to that. The mandate to Adani is from the trade. So the question to be asked is whether trade would like to come to Colombo from India. It is not whether Adani wants it or not. So the question is very, very clear, and Indian trade wants the transshipment to be done in Indian ports. Unfortunately, that's a fact. And that's what all the trade meetings are discussed in India. I mean, you're not there present. Let it be Singaporeans or from Sri Lankans. You're not there when we're talking to our government. We tell our government that our cargo should be transshipped in India. That's a fact. So I would like to, bring the facts on the table. So, politically, everyone can be correct that Adani would do this and do that. So to go with that, it's a trigonometry answer. People are saying the pie is getting bigger, but if you add pi to sin, the sum is 0. So sin is, in my own, as I study Bible, it says that what are you coveting? What is, in business, it's all about greed. We want to grow. So if you add pi to sin, the sum is 0. So somebody's going to lose it. That's a fact. So.
Yeah, I myself have a question from Julian before you go to London in a fast-track plane today. Julian, this new concept of direct callers to Bangladesh and India, would it sustain, continues to grow, and that would obviously affect all transshipment ports? How do you see this new development on one side? And there's a question from this gentleman also. I'll give you that, and then you can answer and finish it.
In continuity of that, you think because of the changing in the volumes and multiple terminals coming in Colombo, do you think some of the terminals may be adapt to getting into feeder business so that they can offer consistent low-cost feederages into the subcontinent ports, and they can accordingly attract more cargo to their terminals? You think that's the possibility that can evolve? That's the question to Julian.
I think in trying to answer that question, which is something that we could talk about, frankly, for the rest of the day, because it raises the whole question about hubs and spokes and what's the best thing for the market and the operators and all the rest of it, is to have a look at Singapore. When I first went to go and work in Singapore with P&O Containers, as it was then, now no longer, which is, I don't know, 30-odd years ago, Singapore was the preeminent hub in Southeast Asia. And there was talk then of hubs developing and direct calls being instituted in places like Lam Shabang, in Indonesia and everywhere else. Not everywhere else, in lots of other places. And a lot of people said, oh, it'll never happen because Singapore will remain preeminent. Actually, what has happened is that as the economies have grown, so hubs have developed in those places. There are now transshipment services running over Lam Shabang, over ports in Indonesia, over ports in Malaysia, and so on. So I think the answer to the question is that we will see direct calls in Bangladesh, in more ports in the Bay of Bengal, and up the west coast. And I think, Silas has already mentioned it, I think, there will be transshipment hubs developing in India, partly as a result of government policy and partly as a result of economics. Does that then mean that Colombo is redundant? No, it doesn't. Look at Singapore now. Look at what's happened in that part of the world. But of course, it depends on whether or not Colombo wants to stay in the race. And that's the key question, and I've already alluded to that. And I think people have to pay attention. You can lose the lot if you're not careful. Again, I mean, the point's already been made. Some LCL consolidation work has gone because Colombo has not been competitive. As to whether some terminals will specialize in feeder, I think probably unlikely. That doesn't mean to say that some will have a predominance of big mainline services and fewer feeders. I think there'll always be a mix, to be frank, because if you can get the main lines and the feeders on the same terminal, then so much the better. So overall, I think the answer is we will see a development of more hubs in South Asia, more direct calls as the market grows, but it doesn't mean to say that one should immediately panic and say, oh, Colombo is redundant. I don't think that's going to be the case. And I think the terminals here will continue to see a mix of services of mainline and feeder. Thanks.
Thank you, Julian. We have a few more minutes. Just one question. Coming back to you, we spoke today about collaborative effects, partnership, and V-factor, right? Will Sri Lanka play a supportive role to assist the growth that we have seen in Indian logistic industry, or will she be seen as a threat to the Indian logistic industry? All three panelists maybe can give a quick comment on that.
I see the role reversal probably. I see instead of Indian cargo coming into Sri Lanka to connect mainline vessels, probably Sri Lanka can become a hub for the other parts of the Indian subcontinent, where cargoes will come in and then they can come back to India to catch the main lines, the bigger vessels. I don't know whether I'm right or wrong, but this is a probable alternative which can happen if larger vessels start calling on the East Coast directly.
I think I'd say much the same thing. I don't think it's going to be a question of either or. I think it's going to be a mix. I think we will see more larger vessels going into Indian ports, but does that mean that they will simply stop coming here? No, I don't think so. I think it'll be a mix, but it depends on people grasping the nettle and making sure that Colombo remains competitive. We are going into another cycle of freight rates going down, so shipping lines will be squeezing the costs as hard as they can, and they will move transshipment services at the drop of the hat if they have the opportunity so to do, and that means that there's a very strong message for this port and the Indian ports as well. I mean, no one's immune to this sort of stuff. So I think it's going to be a mix.
So we already answered this. So.
Okay. One more question, then we have to close the session quickly.
Yes, I have one question. Traditionally, Sri Lanka has benefited with the labor unrest in the Indian ports. And because of that, we've been, with the comparative advantage of the location, a lot of Indian ports traditionally has been having strikes, labor unrest. So with these new ports coming and competition coming, how did India manage this issue of labor, trade unions, to make it viable with so many ports now coming into competition? I think any panelists can give me the answer.
So privatization is one of the answers, the terminals especially. So port, terminals are where the business happens. The port, it belongs to it's a government asset. So a lot of private ports also have come. So if there are strikes, then cargo will automatically move. So whatever trade demands. So it's a natural thing to happen. So now people have realized by striking, you're not going to get anything done. Might as well cooperate. So.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank Sailesh, Julian, and Naveen for this interesting session, and hand it over to Rohan.